On paper, Camilla has achieved the ultimate royal comeback. She sits beside King Charles at state banquets, wears historic tiaras, and holds the title many believed she would never reach, Queen Consort. To the outside world, her status appears completely untouchable, the final triumphant act of a multi-decade public relations campaign that transformed her from an outcast into the female head of the British monarchy. However, inside the private corridors of Buckingham Palace, an entirely different dynamic is taking shape. Behind the formal portraits and carefully orchestrated public appearances, a quiet power shift is unfolding. It is not a loud, public row played out in tabloid headlines, nor is it a series of hasty, chaotic leaks. Instead, it is a methodical, institutional realignment, driven by two senior royals who are quietly coordinating to limit Camilla's influence, restrict her family's access to crown assets, and reframe how this entire era of royal history will be remembered. Before we dive in deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single palace update. The image of absolute stability that the palace projects is beginning to crack from within. The roots of this current shift stretch back 3 decades, connecting the bitter royal battles of the 1990s directly to the modern governance of the crown. For years, the palace narrative relied on the assumption that time, endurance, and official titles would settle every past controversy, but power within a monarchy does not rely solely on who holds the crown in the present. It depends just as heavily on who controls the money, who controls the archives, and who holds the future. Right now, those critical levers of power are moving out of Queen Camilla's reach. What makes this internal tension so formidable for the Queen Consort is the specific pair leading the charge. On one side is Prince William, the Prince of Wales, direct heir to the throne and manager of a vast billion-pound royal estate. On the other is Princess Anne, the king's fiercely pragmatic younger sister and long-standing backbone of the working royal family. Historically, William and Anne operated in completely separate orbits. William focused on preparing for his eventual reign, maintaining a polite but strictly boundary line relationship with his stepmother. He never publicly undermined her position, but he never granted her his full endorsement either. Anne, meanwhile, focused strictly on her relentless schedule of official engagements, maintaining absolute neutrality regarding her brother's personal life and treating Camilla with cold, professional courtesy. Now, those two distinct spheres have quietly joined forces. Sources confirm that a unified strategy has formed between the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal, a two-front approach designed to address both the financial footprint of Camilla's wider family and the historical record of the crown itself. The momentum shifted following a single, highly unusual event that sent shockwaves through the upper echelons of the palace administration. A brief phone call was placed on Princess Anne's behalf directly to senior legal advisors. It was not a call to the palace press office, a public relations manager, or a government minister. It was a short, precise conversation focused entirely on legal clarity regarding specific palace protocols and restricted historical records linked directly to the Queen Consort. The brevity and tone of that conversation signaled something unmistakable to those inside the building. A firm decision had already been made, and those involved were merely confirming that their intended path forward was legally and constitutionally clear. It marked the moment, a shared private sentiment between William and Anne transformed into an active, deliberate campaign. To understand the full weight of this moment, one has to examine Princess Anne's decades-long track record within the House of Windsor. For more than 50 years as a senior working royal, Anne has personified stoicism, discipline, and absolute institutional loyalty. She lived through every turbulent chapter of the 1980s and 1990s in real time. The gradual collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage, the explosive media leaks, the disastrous television admissions, the public divorce, and the tragic fallout in 1997. Through every single crisis, Anne prioritized institutional duty above all else. She never gave reflective interviews about family grievances, never took public sides, and never allowed personal convictions to interfere with the stability of the monarch's reign. She managed her private thoughts with ironclad discipline, operating under the foundational royal principle that personal feelings must always be subordinate to the crown. So why change course now? Why would the most disciplined loyalist in the royal family step out of her traditional neutral role to quietly coordinate a strategy with the Prince of Wales? The answer lies at the exact intersection of power, timing, and personal conviction. Over the past 18 months, Prince William's status within the monarchy has fundamentally transformed. As the Prince of Wales, he now commands independent financial authority and complete administrative oversight over the Duchy of Cornwall, giving him real, actionable leverage that does not require approval from the king or palace courtiers. At the same time, the approaching 30th anniversary of Princess Diana's death has brought long-buried questions regarding historical truth, public legacy, and institutional fairness back to the surface. For 3 decades, the official narrative surrounding that era was quietly softened to accommodate Camilla's eventual integration into the royal family. But as the institution prepares for its next era, both William and Anne have reached a point where they are no longer willing to let institutional convenience override personal truth. Together, the heir to the throne and the Princess Royal possess what no one else in the palace holds: the authority, the financial independence, and the deeply personal motivation to ensure that the past is not rewritten to suit the preferences of those currently in power. While the public image of the royal family relies on tradition and ceremonial grandeur, the actual mechanism of its power rests on financial autonomy. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, the structural hierarchy of the monarchy shifted instantly. Prince William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a vast private estate valued at approximately $1.2 billion, generating tens of millions of pounds in annual income. For nearly 5 decades, the duchy had been managed under the personal vision of King Charles. He used its revenues to fund his private lifestyle, his charitable endeavors, and the personal network of advisors, designers, and associates he built around himself and Camilla. But the moment William assumed direct control as the Duke of Cornwall, he gained sole administrative and financial authority over the portfolio. He was under no legal obligation to consult his father, seek approval from palace courtiers, or maintain existing arrangements. William's first move was executed with surgical administrative precision. For nearly 20 years, Queen Camilla's younger sister, Annabel Elliot, had served as the chief interior designer for the Duchy of Cornwall estate. Appointed shortly after Charles and Camilla's 2005 marriage, she was compensated hundreds of thousands of pounds over 2 decades to decorate luxury holiday rentals, private estates, and commercial properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. The moment William took over, Annabel Elliot's name disappeared from the official duchy financial records. There was no public statement, no dramatic press briefing, and no open dispute. The official accounting documents simply listed her services as completed. However, the message within royal circles was unmistakable. William was not merely auditing an estate, he was actively removing the financial ties connecting Queen Camilla's immediate family to the crown's wealth. In place of the old network, William began filling key institutional roles with individuals loyal exclusively to him and Catherine, trusted advisors from his personal circle, longtime confidants, and professionals aligned with his long-term vision for a streamlined modern monarchy. By systematically replacing the legacy personnel who had served Charles and Camilla for decades, William signaled that the Duchy of Cornwall would no longer function as an extended payroll for the Queen Consort's family. He had drawn a firm boundary between royal governance and personal favoritism. While Prince William asserted control over the institution's financial future, Princess Anne focused on a quiet, parallel operation involving its past. Deep within the stone walls of Windsor Castle sits the Royal Archives. Closed to the public, touring groups, and documentary crews, this secure repository holds the unfiltered, unedited primary sources of British royal history. Within its temperature-controlled vaults lie personal letters, private diaries, secret legal memorandum, and official internal correspondence documenting the monarchy's most sensitive moments across centuries. Crucially, The archives hold the comprehensive, contemporaneous written record of the 1980s and 1990s, the turbulent decades during which the marriage of Charles and Diana fractured, leading to unprecedented institutional panic. Very few individuals possess unrestricted clearance to review these sensitive historical files. As the king's sister and a senior royal trustee, Princess Anne holds that level of access. Sources indicate that Anne undertook a thorough, quiet review of these restricted materials. Her focus was not on the broad, public details that have been endlessly dissected in books and television specials, such as the public separations or leaked audio tapes. Instead, her focus was on the internal, institutional dimension, the private written records detailing who within the palace infrastructure facilitated specific arrangements, how internal warnings were handled, and how the institution treated Princess Diana during the height of her distress. Anne's motivation stems from a fundamental conviction regarding historical accuracy. For over 2 decades, as Camilla was gradually integrated into the royal household, the official narrative surrounding the collapse of the Wales marriage was subtly smoothed over. The institutional failures were downplayed, and the emotional toll on those involved was minimized to make Camilla's eventual ascension to Queen Consort palatable to the British public. Anne's objective is to ensure that this smoothed-over narrative does not become the permanent historical record. She believes that the archives contain crucial evidence of systemic institutional failure that deserves to be preserved in its unredacted truth, rather than modified to suit the public relations preferences of the current reign. Together, these two strategies form a powerful, synchronized effort. Prince William is using his financial independence to dismantle Camilla's structural influence in the present, while Princess Anne is using her archival authority to protect the historical truth of the past. It is a two-front operation targeting money and history, the two areas where Queen Camilla's long-term legacy is most vulnerable. While the administrative removal of legacy personnel sent a quiet shockwave through palace corridors, the true measure of Prince William's strategy is found in how he deploys the financial power of the Duchy of Cornwall. Generating roughly £30 million in annual income, this vast estate provides the Prince of Wales with absolute fiscal autonomy. He is under no obligation to align his spending with his father's household or maintain the philanthropic footprint built during King Charles's tenure. Instead, William has systematically pointed significant duchy resources toward the precise causes his mother championed during her life: mental health support, ending homelessness, and expanding support for early childhood development and severe medical conditions. These were the areas Princess Diana gravitated toward when the establishment viewed her emotional directness as a threat to royal protocol. By anchoring the financial power of his £1.2 billion estate directly to Diana's core philanthropic vision, William is making an unmistakable institutional statement. He is utilizing the income of the crown to build the very monarchy his mother envisioned, effectively bypassing the current reign's preferred priorities. Concurrently, a far more discreet, deniable form of boundary setting has unfolded around Queen Camilla's extended family. For years, Camilla's children, siblings, and wider social circle enjoyed steady proximity to the center of royal life, frequently appearing on guest lists for official crown events, securing invitations to major state functions, and maintaining soft access to the monarchy's inner orbit. That access is quietly narrowing. There are no dramatic announcements or public revocations of privileges. Instead, invitations simply cease arriving. Seating arrangements are restructured without commentary. Access to private royal estates is silently tightened. It is a slow, deliberate method of soft isolation that leaves no single event open to public controversy, yet adds up to an unmistakable reality. The wider family network Camilla worked for 2 decades to integrate into royal life is being methodically placed on the outside looking in. In the world of constitutional monarchy, symbols are not mere decoration, they are the primary currency of power and legitimacy. When Camilla was crowned Queen Consort, wearing historic jewels and occupying the central seat alongside King Charles, it represented the absolute pinnacle of her official acceptance. Yet inside the palace, those ceremonial markers are increasingly understood as temporary, Her time holding these historic symbols is strictly tied to the present reign. The historic tiaras, the official residences, and the ceremonial deference she commands will inevitably pass forward. The underlying reality is that the ultimate symbolic transformation awaits Princess Catherine. When the time comes, Catherine will inherit the permanent cultural and institutional weight of the female crown, a reality that makes Camilla's current coronation status look less like an enduring victory and more like a brief, transitional chapter. This shift in symbolic authority is already being actively structured through the redistribution of royal patronages. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, hundreds of official patronages were left vacant, requiring reallocation among senior working royals. Rather than seeing these high-profile associations flow toward Camilla's circle, key organizational ties have been quietly redirected. When you look closely at where the primary weight of the institution is being placed, it is moving decisively toward the next generation. The clearest signal of this deliberate transition came with the formal authority granted to William and Catherine to issue royal warrants. For centuries, the power to grant royal warrants, the official seal of approval allowing businesses to display the royal arms and declare they supply the royal household, has been one of the monarch's most strictly guarded prerogatives. By extending this authority to the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Crown effectively handed the commercial, cultural, and aesthetic future of the monarchy to William and Catherine. Catherine became the first Princess of Wales in over a century, empowered to bestow these prestigious seals of endorsement. This move carries profound long-term implications. The brands, institutions, and design houses chosen by William and Catherine will shape the visual identity and public endorsement of the British monarchy for the next 30 years. It effectively bypasses Queen Camilla's influence over the Crown's modern identity, ensuring that the businesses and causes benefiting from royal prestige are defined entirely by the future king and queen. Enjoying this deep dive into the inner workings of the palace? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of our detailed analysis into the history, power, and secrets shaping the modern monarchy. Step by step, through the strategic redirection of financial wealth, the quiet reduction of social access, and the formal transfer of symbolic authority, Prince William and Princess Anne are executing a masterclass in long-term institutional strategy. They are not waiting for the future to happen, they are actively designing it. As the Crown's future branding shifts irrevocably toward the next generation, Queen Camilla is left holding the ceremonial titles of the present, while watching the permanent authority of the monarchy slip permanently out of reach. Beyond the structural shifts in finance and historical documentation, the true scale of Queen Camilla's position is reflected in her changing personal footprint. For years, her sanctuary was Ray Mill House, the private Wiltshire country home she purchased in the mid-1990s following her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles. It was her ultimate retreat, the place she publicly described as her escape from the pressures of royal protocol, where she could step out of her official identity and simply be herself. The recent decision to transfer ownership and quietly step back from that private sanctuary marks a profound shift in her personal calculus. In royal life, individuals do not relinquish their private retreats casually. Such moves signal a fundamental change in how one views the future, a realization that the private spaces built before entering the royal family are no longer sustainable sanctuaries against the institutional realities taking shape around them. Currently, Camilla moves through the highest tier of royal estates as Queen Consort: Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Windsor Castle, and Balmoral. Yet this vast infrastructure is entirely temporary, tied strictly to the reign of King Charles. The arithmetic confronting her future is stark. When Charles's reign inevitably concludes, the entire estate network transforms instantly. Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Sandringham, and Balmoral pass directly under the complete control of King William. In that future, her access to primary royal residences will no longer exist as a right. It will depend entirely on the discretion and invitation of a monarch who grew up witnessing the direct impact of her past choices on his mother's life. Her projected inheritance, properties like Clarence House or Highgrove, provides private comfort, but represents an absolute contraction of institutional power. She faces the reality of transitioning from the summit of state influence to a sidelined figure whose presence is politely managed by the next generation. Compounding these structural vulnerabilities is an ongoing, unresolved friction within palace walls regarding private associations and personal loyalties. A central point of tension involves Camilla's refusal to completely sever ties with controversial figures in her long-standing personal circle, whose public associations have created severe PR liabilities for the monarchy. For Prince William, maintaining absolute distance from any individual associated with major institutional scandals is non-negotiable. His modernizing framework leaves zero room for personal sentimentality when it threatens the moral standing or public trust of the crown. His message to the Queen Consort's household has been firm and consistent: distance the monarchy permanently from these liabilities, or accept the institutional consequences of maintaining those connections. Camilla, however, views abandoning friendships that predate her royal marriage as both personally impossible and inherently unfair. She sees her private relationships as separate from her official role. This fundamental disagreement has resulted in a quiet, persistent standoff. Where Camilla sees personal loyalty, William sees a critical lapse in institutional judgment that justifies his concerns about her influence going forward. Every week this boundary remains contested. It quietly erodes Camilla's internal leverage within palace decision-making, giving her detractors further reason to limit her authority over official matters. Sitting directly in the middle of this escalating dynamic is King Charles, and his position is perhaps the most deeply complex aspect of the entire situation. Managing significant health challenges while continuing to fulfill state duties, the king's capacity to absorb complex, multi-front internal family conflicts has naturally diminished. Sources describe a pivotal 40-minute telephone conversation between King Charles and Princess Anne, a call that was neither angry nor accusatory, but deeply pained. It was the conversation of a monarch who fully comprehends what his sister and his heir are doing, yet finds himself structurally and emotionally unable to forcefully argue against it. Protecting Camilla's position would require Charles to take direct action against his own family. It would mean demanding that William restore financial contracts, duchy access, and institutional influence to individuals William deliberately removed. Charles knows William would not comply. It would mean ordering Princess Anne to halt her review of restricted palace archives. Charles knows Anne would not comply either. To forcefully defend Camilla's circle, the king would have to publicly align himself against both his sister, the most trusted worker in the family, and his direct heir, in defense of a network that millions still associate with the breakdown of his first marriage. The political and personal cost of taking such a stand is simply too high. Yet the deepest layer of the king's paralysis is emotional. Charles cannot forcefully push back against William and Anne's actions because he privately acknowledges the root cause behind them. He understands why his son carries deep-seated motivations regarding his mother's memory, and why his sister feels a profound duty to protect the unredacted truth of royal history. Charles was there. He was the central figure whose choices created that original grief. How does a father argue against his son's devotion to his late mother's legacy when he himself was the source of her pain? How does a brother tell his sister to prioritize his wife's comfort over the historical truth of an era that fractured the family? Unable to offer a convincing defense, the king is left in a state of quiet acceptance. He recognizes that the forces quietly reshaping his wife's influence are driven by consequences he himself set in motion decades ago, leaving him powerless to stop the very momentum currently taking hold inside his palace. To those viewing this quiet palace revolution through the lens of dramatic storytelling, it is tempting to frame the entire sequence of events as personal retaliation. It looks on the surface like a calculated modern payback plot. Prince William and Princess Anne using financial muscle, archival access, and symbolic maneuvers to methodically strip away everything Queen Camilla spent 3 decades building. In that narrative version, every removed relative from a payroll, every redirected patronage, and every quiet exclusion of an old associate is treated as a score being settled for Princess Diana. However, sources close to the institution suggest that viewing this purely as revenge fundamentally misinterprets what is taking place. Simple revenge is emotional, short-sighted, and designed for immediate public humiliation. It seeks a dramatic showdown, a public scandal, a stripped title, or a headline-grabbing confrontation. What William and Anne are building is something far more patient, permanent, and structurally meaningful. It is not an emotional outburst. It is a long-term governance strategy. Revenge focuses on destroying an opponent in the present. Legacy focuses on building the institution of the future. By addressing the financial dependencies, the symbolic authority, and the historical records surrounding the crown today, the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal are ensuring that the monarchy's next era is built on firm, transparent foundations, ones that permanently limit the structural influence of the network Camilla brought into the palace fold. When you step back and analyze the modernizing agenda Prince William is applying to the House of Windsor, its true inspiration becomes unmistakable. It is not merely a collection of efficient management practices or updated public relations protocols. It is Princess Diana's core vision, expressed through the institutional architecture of the state. When Diana operated within the royal family, her directness, her demand for genuine human connection, and her insistence on addressing social issues, from mental health to homelessness, were viewed by palace traditionalists as destabilizing and inappropriate for a senior royal. She was told that emotional authenticity was beneath the dignity of the crown, and she paid a heavy personal and institutional price for refusing to conform. Today, those exact principles form the primary pillars of the modern monarchy William is actively constructing. The emotional intelligence once dismissed as a liability is now celebrated as the key to the crown's survival in the 21st century. The direct accountability once viewed as dangerous is now built into how the Duchy of Cornwall operates. By directing vast financial resources toward homelessness, mental health, and social welfare, William is taking the exact causes his mother was criticized for championing and embedding them directly into the financial engine of the British monarchy. Princess Anne's parallel work ensures that this shift is matched by historical integrity. By protecting the unredacted truth within the archives, she is ensuring that the institutional failures of the past are recognized, preventing the history of that era from being softened to suit the preferences of those currently holding power. Together, they are creating a monarchy that reflects the values Diana fought for, building an institution worthy of the price she paid. This brings us to the ultimate, ironic core of this entire royal chapter. Decades ago, when the dust settled on the collapse of the Wales marriage, it appeared to many that Camilla had won the long-term conflict. She secured the man she loved, endured decades of public scrutiny, achieved full integration into the royal family, and ultimately walked into Westminster Abbey to be crowned Queen Consort alongside King Charles. She gained the titles, the historic jewels, the official residences, and the central seat at every state banquet. Yet, as the current reign progresses, a starker reality is coming into view. Camilla won the immediate title, but she is losing the long-term institutional war. Her ceremonial status is strictly bound to the present moment, while the permanent future of the monarchy is being actively shaped by Diana's memory, Diana's values, and her eldest son's quiet, unwavering resolve. You cannot litigate past grief, you cannot outmaneuver an institutional legacy, and you cannot stop a future king who spent nearly 30 years quietly determining how to honor his mother's memory. Princess Diana never lived to see the modern monarchy take shape. She left behind 2 young sons, a shocked nation, and a family that barely lowered its flags. But inside the stone walls of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle today, something profound is taking place. Her son and her sister-in-law are moving together, quietly and permanently reshaping everything Queen Camilla built into an institution that Diana would have recognized as her own. It is not revenge. It is something far more powerful. It is legacy. Now that we've broken down the financial shifts, the archival reviews, and the long-term strategy taking place behind palace doors, we want to hear your thoughts on where the monarchy goes from here. 1. Do you view Prince William and Princess Anne's actions as a justified protection of Princess Diana's legacy, or do you see it as unfair treatment of Queen Camilla's current role? 2. How do you think King Charles should handle the growing divide between his wife and his direct heir? When Prince William eventually ascends the throne, what changes do you expect to see in how the royal family manages its history and its finances? 3. Sound off in the comments below with your perspective, and if you enjoyed this detailed breakdown, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow royal history enthusiasts, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analysis on the power, secrets, and future of the British monarchy.